Okay, ready? Hello, everyone. Like Deacon Matt said, we're David and Mercedes Rizzo, and we are here to talk about ways parishes can welcome and include people with disabilities and their families. We would like to thank all of you for coming out here today on a Saturday to address such an important topic as how the church can better address the concerns of people with special needs and for those who love and care for them. We would like to thank Deacon Matt and Jessica for inviting us to this important event.
It's great to be here in the state of Iowa. As you might be able to tell, we're not from around here. We're from New Jersey. We know that what you're thinking, the Sopranos, Real Housewives of New Jersey, the Jersey Shore. Now, I just heard one of you whisper, great, they're gonna tell us about gym, tan, and laundry. But you don't have to worry, we're not here to talk about that. The fact that we do live in New Jersey, though, does have some bearing after all. You see, we have a daughter with autism, and in New Jersey, has the highest rate of autism in the country. 1 in 45 children in our state are diagnosed with autism, according to the Centers for Disease Control. The nation's rate as a whole is 1 in 68 children diagnosed. And autism is just one of many disabilities. Given these numbers, you can see why the dignity of people with disabilities is very near and dear to our hearts.
We are amazed at how many people we meet either know or have a child with a disability. Many things have changed. People with disabilities are largely raised at home today, often educated in schools with typical students, and generally involved in many activities. Attitudes are changing. We meet so many people who show kindness and respect to our daughter and other children with special needs. It is heartening to see this, but there's still a very long way to go. The last time we were in Iowa was back in the early 1990s. This was shortly after the movie Field of Dreams was released. And for any of you who may not be familiar with the film, it takes place in Dyersville, Iowa. It is about a farmer who plows over his cornfields to build a baseball diamond. Now, we know that's not really exactly around the corner from here, but when Jessica invited us here to speak, we remembered our trip to Iowa with great fondness. Those were carefree days for us. We were able to go on vacation with no kids in tow. That soon changed. Shortly after that trip, we became parents for the first time when our son Brendan was born. Other than the demands of being a first-time parents, our life was going along pretty smoothly. We would take him to church, and we would feel spiritually nurtured at Mass. Life was good.
2 years later, we welcomed our second son, Colin. Both boys were healthy and made milestones as expected. Going to Mass was a bit more challenging with 2 little boys in tow, but still something we could handle. Now, as our boys got a little older and more mobile, we found ourselves in the crying room. You probably know that that's a place where young families and their kids are banished during Mass. I'm only half kidding about the banished part. Well, it's a place where young children can be themselves when they're too young to understand exactly how to behave in church during Mass. And in our particular church, this was a tiny room, and in addition to being a crying room, it had a dual purpose. It actually housed the priest's spare vestments on an old-fashioned tall wooden rack. Now, who thought that was a good idea? Well, every week we'd go to Mass, And it was the Saturday 5 p.m. Mass. And we'd see a young woman who would come in with her 4 children. She had 2 babies in a double stroller and 2 toddlers, about no more than 5 or 6 years old. Now, to say that the toddlers were swinging from the chandeliers, that is only a bit of an exaggeration. We were no strangers to rambunctious kids. We were in the crying room for a similar reason, after all. But one of her boys liked to climb. So he would climb up the vestment rack like he was climbing a tree. We had to grab hold of the rack to keep it from falling over with all the priest's vestments. The mother looked overwhelmed and frazzled, as you might expect, and none of us in the room really felt spiritually nourished. On the car ride home, we would discuss what we perceived to be her complete, remember we were very young, her complete inability to control her children. And in actuality, we know now, we had misjudged the situation entirely. Knowing what we know now, we were very uncharitable in our hearts. And without even knowing it, we were being unwelcoming. We did not recognize the signs of being a special need family. We just saw it as, wait for it, bad parenting. Boy, we were wrong.
We didn't know how wrong we were until our 3rd child, our daughter Danielle, came along. Danielle has autism. She is nonverbal. And it wasn't long before we understood how the frazzled woman in the crying room might have felt when she sensed our disapproving stares and demeanor. We had been given a glimpse into our future and what we were going to experience. It wasn't long before we learned firsthand how important it is to feel welcomed in church as a special needs family ourselves. A few minutes ago, we mentioned the field of dreams. What parent in the room does not have specific dreams for his or her child? As Catholic parents, our dreams might include our child attending Mass, learning about God, receiving the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, and coming into a strong relationship with Christ. Part of this dream is to attend Mass and be nurtured by a welcoming parish community. In order to better understand the importance of this, let's talk a little about the stresses and the challenges of being a special needs family, and then explore what the church can do to make people with special needs and their families feel welcomed and included. We will discuss how parishes in the pews, the clergy, the organizations and ministries of the local parish, and the diocese can accomplish this a little better. There are many obstacles and challenges facing special needs families. Obstacles seem like mountains when your child is unable to speak or maintain eye contact, when they melt down if a routine is broken. Children with special needs can be disruptive, especially in church where silence is valued. Attending Mass is important because we encounter God, but we also encounter and participate in the community of faith. Parishioners can make a big difference by welcoming our children and standing with us as we explore the great mystery of faith together. Often it is the things that the parishioners cannot see that make it hard. Maybe we had to call poison control at 2 a.m. Maybe our child had difficulty falling asleep the night before. Special needs families face all of this. It is often a struggle just getting out the door. Getting out the door as a family and getting out the door on time. As special needs families enter the church, They have learned to scan the pews, looking for someone with a kind face that they can sit next to, who will understand if their child has excessive movement, is excessively noisy, that will be tolerant if they are asked to move so they can make a quick exit. So please be aware of this. Be the kind face that special needs families are hoping to see. Special needs parents are often fearful that their child will be disruptive to others. In our situation, we were always worried that at the moment of consecration, our daughter would shriek, "What would everyone think?"
So these concerns are very real.
Mm-hmm.
Now, recently we were visiting a neighboring parish, and in a pew in front of us, there was a woman who had a young child with Down syndrome, and she was not having an easy time sitting. She was moving all over the pew. She was flopping her legs over the top of the pew, and she was attempting to take off her very pretty dress shoes, but she was making a lot of noise. And people were turning their heads away, or they were looking at her, you know. And the mother was trying very, very hard to help her daughter calm down and to attend, but she was having a hard time of it. It was just one of those days. And a welcoming smile from those near her would certainly have put her more at ease and helped her feel supported and welcomed. Because the reactions of parishioners do matter. One Sunday at Mass, during the sign of peace, our daughter Danielle, she was, without any prompting from us, she reached out her hand to the woman in the pew in front of us for the sign of peace. And we'd been prompting her for a long time, really as long as we could remember, to shake hands during peace. And up till now, she had always needed us to prompt her or to tell her. We either had to guide her hand or something like that, and to tell her to shake hands. Well, you can imagine how wonderful it felt for us to see Danielle reach out to her neighbors in the pew and even vocalize to the best of her ability the sound of the word peace. Now, it wasn't a clear or distinct peace. It was a little like a grunt, but it was what she was able to do at the time. However, the woman was startled or something, or offended by Danielle's inability to say the word peace clearly, or whatever, and she withdrew her hand before Danielle could shake it. And she turned her head away and her body very quickly. And talk about taking the wind out of our sails. We had been experiencing joy a moment before, but it turned into sorrow and feelings of rejection in a single moment. And who knows what Danielle felt, very much the same as we did, I imagine. Fortunately, this kind of thing seems less and less the norm. In fact, we found the opposite. We found parishioners genuinely supportive of us as a special needs family. But we've also found that they may not know how to help. How to help. So teaching parishioners about people with special needs can help parishioners show their welcoming spirit in a more visible way. And one way to do this sounds simple, doesn't it? Is to teach parishioners about people with special needs in ways that will help the parishioners understand and respond with compassion. The woman's reaction to our daughter's attempt at shaking her hand might have been warmer and more welcoming if she had known that when people with special needs, when they have trouble blessing themselves or make inarticulate sounds or show a lack of sustained eye contact or make inappropriate verbal responses, or they move excessively, that these things are almost surely due to being a sign of a disability and not of an irreverence. So I'm going to repeat that because it's so important. When they do those things, it's a sign of a disability and not a sign of irreverence. And parishioners are definitely more likely to respond in a welcoming way when they understand that.
So how does this information get communicated? Parishes need to ask themselves this question. Clergy and parish councils can work in concert with parents, with people with special needs, teachers, catechists, and organizations that help people with disabilities to come up with ways to educate the parishioners at large. What might this look like? We have listed a few things that could help. 1, you could use the church bulletin to inform parishioners about people with special needs. The bulletin could explain the difference between this is a sign of a disability versus a sign of irreverence. It could point out that when things in the pew look odd or somewhat out of place, it might be because the person in the pew has special needs. It might feature a discussion of various special needs such as autism, Down syndrome, hearing impairment. It could discuss the special needs catechesis program in the parish, as well as what various ministries and organization in the parish or in the diocese is doing to help. 2, a priest or a deacon can incorporate special needs information into the homily or other appropriate points. For instance, there are several gospel passages which address Jesus' compassionate response to epileptics, lepers, and others. These can be discussed in a way which draws a parallel with today's special needs individuals and their families. Jesus ministered among many people who in our day might have been considered to have a developmental, a medical, or a psychiatric diagnosis. He responded with compassion, and when an illicit link is made here, parishioners will respond likewise.
3, provide in-services to Eucharistic ministers and others about the variety of possible supports available to people with special needs. People with disabilities, for instance, physical problems with swallowing the host, or those with sensory issues who cannot tolerate consuming the whole host, they may receive a tiny piece of the host. And the parish can in-service Eucharistic ministers, that they might see someone in line, for instance, standing behind and making a sign that they like a small piece of host for the person in front of them or for themselves if they can do it. And the sign looks like this, right? You make a little sign and it says, "I'd like a small piece of host, please." Mm-hmm. So this person may have difficulty coordinating the complex way to receive and hand also, right? So you know how we do it with the left hand atop the right, and then switching to the right hand to take the host to the mouth, right? Now this is very hard for people who might have difficulty sequencing complex movements. So I'm a physical therapist, and I see this all the time. I work with people with developmental disabilities, and the sequencing of complex movements is very hard. Things like that, things like the sign of the cross, very complicated. So anyway, our daughter still has difficulty with this, and we still will stand there. One of us will stand behind and will hold her hands so that we usually keep this hand from moving, because what she'll try to do is this type of number, right? And that's awkward. So I'll hold this hand, and then she'll have to do that, and she does it very, very well. So now let's discuss ways that the parish and diocese at an organizational level can help people with special needs and their families so that they feel more welcome. So the following ideas are only a few of the ways that this can happen, and there are many, many more. So one way is to provide catechesis and sacramental preparation that's adapted to the needs of people with disabilities in the parish. It's important to remember here that people with disabilities are individuals, and they all have individual needs. What works with one child, right, isn't going to work with everyone. So programs do need to be fashioned in a way which addresses each individual child's strengths and their weaknesses to allow them to succeed, because we want them to succeed. So having the child receive the Eucharist, that is extremely salient for parents of children with special needs, because it's in many ways the central sacrament of our faith. Clearly, it's the center of our liturgy within the sacrifice of the Mass. It's the way that we commune with Jesus on a very real way in the bread and the wine, and in one another as the people of God. So as special needs parents, we cannot stress this enough, that parishes and dioceses have a responsibility to provide appropriate, individualized catechetical programs and support sacramental inclusion for all our special needs children and adults as well. So this is a very big topic, and we can't fully explore it here today. But the key points to take back to your parishes include making sure that the programs are accessible, both geographically and physically, and for the students. And make sure that they're accessible with regard to how the content is taught. How is it communicated? Such as using sign language interpreters for the deaf community, pictures and other resources for the developmentally challenged community. And also, when you're teaching the stuff, narrow the content to what's essential for the sacraments. And programs can be given in various venues and with regard to various sizes and numbers of individuals. So they can be small groups, 2 to 4 kids. They can be individual at home in a setting like this wonderful building. There's so many different options that you have to think out of the box to structure those programs in ways that make sense for the kids you're working with. And then this is so important, and I see this when we were reading Jessica's description online about the program here, and how wonderful it was. It absolutely does this point. Catechists should attempt to use the strategies and techniques that have been shown to be effective in teaching children with special needs in school and in other places. So special educators, like, people have been doing this now for a while, and they've kind of got it down. The growth in our daughter is just astounding when we look at what she's able to do now versus what she was able to do then. For instance, we were at dinner last night, and we were able to sit through an entire dinner and have adult conversation at the same time. That would never have happened previous. And that was because of all the wonderful special education that was done. So if we take that model and we incorporate those wonderful special ed technologies, and I don't just mean electronics and stuff, I mean the way you teach, that will really help.
Okay. Other organizational responses at the parish and diocesan level can include developing opportunities for people with special needs to participate as altar servers and members of the choir. It can also include offering adaptive, sensory-friendly masses at various parishes throughout the diocese and providing support groups for special needs families. These are wonderful ways to show parents that the Church cares about the people with special needs and make them feel welcome. Adaptive, sensory-friendly masses, in particular, are a great way to have people with special needs participate meaningfully.
Now, we recently heard about a great project from the Knights of Columbus, and it was put together in the Trenton Diocese, Trenton, New Jersey. That's where we come from. And the Knights, they run a special needs support group there for special needs kids and their families. And they were hosting a fishing trip. So we're on the Jersey Shore, you know, and there's a lot of opportunity for fishing. So they hosted a fishing trip at a wooden pier in Port Monmouth, New Jersey. And as reported in the diocesan newspaper, The Monitor, Knights and Fishing Club members worked patiently with the novice fishermen, baiting hooks, demonstrating line casting, and reminding them to watch for bobbling lures. Waves gently lapped the shore as excited shrieks rang out from the youngsters when they saw fish just below the surface or gulls sweeping to capture the bait on the rail. Wow, that's a great way to make people with special needs and their families feel welcome. It's exciting just reading that. In addition to the fishing event, the support group has put on a program where experts in the field of legal and social assistance will educate the special needs community on a variety of assistance programs that are available for them. And lastly, the church can provide opportunities for families of children with special needs to develop a strong spirituality by supporting them as they strive to overcome isolation, find meaning in their role as special needs parents, and deepen their experience of the sacred in their lives. Now, retreats are an excellent way to provide this support. We've been fortunate to participate in retreats for special needs families. It was a deeply spiritual experience, for instance, to pray the Stations of the Cross with other special needs families. And that was particularly powerful because we all could relate to each other and pray together. And as we were, you know, in a way, not to over-dramatize, but carrying our own crosses, you know. And so we cannot overestimate the value of prayer when raising a loved one with special needs. Now, I just want to actually point to something on this because it's very, very interesting. Do you see that picture on the right? I don't know if any of you can recognize it. It's a group of flowers. So there's 3 red flowers there. And then as you go around the square over there, there's 10 white flowers, followed by a red flower, followed by 10 more white flowers, and all around. So does anyone have an idea what that actually is? It's a rosary. It's a rosary garden, and it's color-coded without even being intended. It wasn't intended for people with special needs, but this is at a retreat house in southern New Jersey, in the Pinelands of New Jersey. So this was a rosary that works particularly well for people who are very visually oriented in their learning styles. So people with disabilities like autism are often able to understand visual information at a much higher level than they can spoken information. So I just thought this was beautiful, and I wanted to point it out. All right, so it's wonderful to see things changing for the better, and the church is stepping up, and it is reaching out to people with special needs and their families in an attempt to make them feel more welcome. And that's what the conference is all about here today, really, isn't it? So we're excited to be a part of that program today. And so once again, we did want to thank all of you who have come out on a Saturday morning with the intention of supporting the deaf and special needs community in our parish. Thank you.